I try to avoid that moment of like sitting down and looking at a blank piece of paper ever. That kind of that you have to put chips in something, so you never get to that spot. And it happened on this one. I think after Inherent Vice, I started to sort of write a bunch of things down straight away that had occurred to me, and that during the course of editing that film, I was daydreaming about what this movie would be and trying to write things down, but not trying to write too much. And I think it was back to this thing that we talked about before. It was wanting to not get to a mess that I have been in before, which is writing 600 pages.
Yeah.
And having to bring it down. So I had enough ideas on this where I felt like daydream and think about it and turn it over in your mind and write a little bit here and there, but never get to that spot where you've overwritten it or you haven't figured a few things out before you really jump in.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, and today I am bringing back the WriterTube, AuthorTube videos. I haven't done one of these in months, but now that my Regility series is winding down, I thought I would go back to talking about writing and how I feel about the AuthorTube scene. So, complete transparency, right off the bat, I am not a published author yet. I am in the very early stages of self-publishing my novel, which I wrote. It is about 600 manuscript pages right now, so take that as you will. As I give my writing advice, I just feel necessary to make sure people know that right off the bat. I do write a lot. I love writing. It's probably my favorite thing to do, and especially over the past year, with being in quarantine, I've really come to my own, I think, as a writer, and I hope that I can share some of my experiences with you. So as someone who watches a lot of AuthorTube videos, I've noticed a big problem among AuthorTubers and commenters in the sense of sitting down and not knowing what you want to write. And although I can understand the problem, it's not something that particularly happens to me. So the general idea of this video is to show to you what I do in order to beat that initial writer's block that a lot of writers have when they sit down and don't know what to write. So the person who I use at the start of this video is Paul Thomas Anderson. If you don't know who Paul Thomas Anderson is, he is the writer and director of such amazing films as Phantom Thread, Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and many, many other classic movies. And what he said in this interview really spoke to me because I have a very similar philosophy on writing and sitting down and writing. And that being already having an idea of what you're going to do before you write it down. And I think the problem that many of the AuthorTubers who have mentioned this problem and commenters alike just think that when you sit down and get a pen and paper out or write on a Microsoft Word document that the words are just going to come to you. And for me, that's never really been the case. I think that when you have your scheduled writing time, that time is scheduled for writing. It should not be scheduled for thinking of what to write. You should not compartmentalize everything to do with writing into one writing session. You shouldn't sit there and say, okay, now I need to think about what I'm going to write. Now I got to think of ideas. That stuff should be going on in your head throughout the day. For me, I love to run. So when I run, which usually takes about like 30, 45 minutes, a lot of that time, because I have peace and quiet, I use to think about things I'm going to write about. So when I come home, I already have the thought process going, the writer mentality going. So I sit down, there's no hesitation, I know I'm going to write. And it's not so much of writing about ideas, there's also the ideas of how you're going to put your imagination onto the paper. So thinking about writing is not limited to what I want to write about, what plots I want to write about, what kind of characters I want to write about. You have to physically think about how you're going to put that onto the page, and that's something that I do quite often in my daily life. It's not something I say specifically for my writing sessions. When I go to my writing sessions, I already know what I'm going to write about. For the most part, obviously things change when you're writing, and when I'm writing, I'm usually pretty okay with my mind going to different places because there's no real fun in, limiting yourself, even though a lot of other tubers like that. But ultimately, I think the more experience you have with writing, the easier the idea process comes to, because you get more used to your writing style, especially if you're a new author, you haven't discovered your writing style yet. For me, I have a fairly good idea of what my writing style is, although I like to teach it up from time to time. I basically know what I like to write about and how I like to write it, so it's easier for me to go out through my day, constantly thinking about ideas that I have, and so that when I come to sit down, I know what I'm going to do, and I have an idea of how I'm going to plot it out and how it's going to look. Even though a lot of that can change while I'm writing, at least I come down with the idea when I sit down with the confidence of, okay, I'm not just starting with a blank piece of paper. Starting with a blank piece of paper, both literally on your blank piece of paper and in your mind, having no idea what you're going to write about, is not particularly helpful because, first of all, you get the stress of, I need to come up with an idea. You need to come up with an idea. your mind starts to wander. Kind of like me when I do my videos. I have all these great ideas going into the videos. When I sit down and record, it sort of, my mind gets scrambled and I freeze and I edit all that out so I look a lot smarter than I am. And the same thing can be said for writing. But, the good thing about writing is that I don't do it on a camera. I do it, in my private time. So it's less pressure there. And if you have any ideas of how to beat writer's block, I suggest that you leave them in the comments because I'm always open to new ideas. I want to stress first and foremost that I despise a lot of authortube in general and writing advice, as they call it. These are just my ideas. I should clarify also that thinking about writing and writing are not the same thing. Thinking about writing is completely separate from your actual writing time. The Vlog Brothers have their writing advice video where they say thinking about writing is the same thing as writing. It's not. It's completely different. It assists you in writing, but it's not the actual writing itself. Even if you have the ideas, literally putting them on paper or on your Word document is completely different from just thinking about it and thinking you're a hot shot because you have a great idea, but you're not actually putting it down on paper. It's not the same thing. Do not trust them. And that is a general problem I have with authortube in general. My goals with this channel is not to tell you how to write. I have ideas of how to solve writer's block. I recommend that you try these ideas, but I by no means want you to... I by no means think that my beliefs on writing are what 100% everyone should do because writing can only be done one way, which is a complete fallacy. But I, suggest that you try this idea if you're struggling with writer's block. If you're one of those people who sits down a lot and doesn't know what to write, I, highly recommend that you think about it throughout the day so that when it comes down to your actual writing time, you are actually going to be writing. And if you have your own ideas of how to beat writer's block, please leave them in the comments because, I want to generate a community that's, open to new ideas. But with the knowledge that no single person has the exact right way to write. These are just all ideas thrown out for people to try and see what works for them. And if this does work for you, cool. And yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't usually do writing videos that often anymore, but I still hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I'm more of a booktuber. I'm more of a Joyce tuber, if that's a thing. But that's me ending pretty soon, actually. But, I still hope you enjoyed this. Maybe this will encourage you to write if you're one of my followers who just is mostly into the reading element of literature. I think writing is just important if you want to understand, the full scope of literature, in my opinion. But, yeah, thank you for making it this far. And let me know if this video is helpful. And I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.